everyone, welcome back to the channel and to our steampunk arc build. Today we will be building some airships, some interiors, as well as showing some buildings I have built off camera, including this one for the entrance. And here you can see it is a more classical style to match the architecture of the building we built in the first episode. In addition, there is a side pavilion. It will be seating or tables, but at this point I'm not really sure, so we shall see. And as you can see here on the side, I also have a flat ride that I have added. I'm planning on it being some sort of steampunk airship ride. So some interesting things about this build. The first here, these arches I actually created using parentheses from the fonts that they give in game. And for this circle window, I have used a circular sign to give me the circle, and as you can see, also a wall panel to surround it that matches the color of the marble. And for the roof, we have some townhouse pieces from the sorcery pack, and here I've just used some standard wood pieces and some platforms to make this roof and the roof color. And I've chosen a bright blue just because I thought brown or gray or something would be kind of bland. And up here for the dome, as you can see, I have actually used the cauldron from the sorcerer's pack, which actually works kind of nicely. I mean, there are some divots, but I think it looks pretty good as it is. And on the very top, some upside down cauldrons, which are really nice because of the color that you can make them shiny metallic. This is the front of the entrance. The side wings are just to hide the buildings to the sides. And here is the facade that I've started for the train station. And as you can see, one of the rides will go right in front of it and then enter a building at the end for the fake station. So let's get into starting a airship. And in this case, the airship will be more of what you would expect a hot air balloon to look like. And we're going to make it more steampunk. Right here, I'm adding a circle basic shape because I want to have a kind of a band around it. I'm imagining this as a metal balloon, which is why I choose some rust sort of colors for it. For the ribbing, I finally found, after trying out many different things, the glass with the frame around it, when you create really large ones, it still has a thin enough profile to give you a nice rib for the balloon. So that's what I use here. I now have the band completed, which I think looks really nice, and I have in the colors I like. And here I'm going to do the ribbing, and I change it to the color of the balloon just because I think rather than having a gold color, it makes it look better, more matched to the balloon. So I'm then adding some decoration to the front. I would think in a Victorian build you would have a balloon, particularly steampunk, that would have a lot of detail because the Victorians tended to like that. So I'm adding that in some gold colors. Eventually I removed the pitchfork and replace it with the dragon tail that is supposed to be attached to the, I guess, the dragon coaster ride. I found these pieces and I decided that some side fins would look interesting on this, so I added those. And then for the top, I added a giant light. I thought that would be kind of interesting. And then as I was researching old Victorian drawings of airships and what they imagined they might look like, a lot of them had sails. So I decided that this one should also have sails at the top. So I'm using the canopy piece, and here I just have one, but eventually I end up putting 3 together. Then I'm adding some more detail again because I feel like here we are, Victorian steampunk, they should have a lot of detail. And now I'm changing the sail so that it has 3 parts to make it look like one larger sail. And then I will add the supports for it, or as I imagine would be needed. I do something here that doesn't actually make a lot of sense when I add the ropes at the bottom to tie it, because you would imagine that a sail would be able to move in the horizontal plane to catch the wind whichever direction it was coming from, even if the airship was moving in a constant direction. But in the end, I just used some ropes to connect the bottom of the sail, which doesn't really make a lot of sense because there's really no way to turn it. But I think it looks cool, and I'm just going to leave it as it is. I don't think very many people will spend a lot of time analyzing this. So if you look at old drawings of what they imagine flying might be like, right around when helium balloons and hot air balloons were first made, you see a lot of fanciful stuff. They'll have flaps and potentially sails that look like wings and things. So it's kind of interesting. So I'm trying to have this look somewhat fanciful in that regard. But in the end, it's more in the style of a hot air balloon, because here you can see I'm adding now the basket where the riders would sit. And in this case, I'm going to have this balloon sitting near the entrance when you come through, kind of as an air taxi. And of course, it won't actually be usable, but it will be presented as an air taxi. So there will be seats in the back, which I create out of some basic shapes here. You can see the I've used a basic kind of M&M shape, and then I'm using the letter C of the fonts to create kind of a frame for it, which in the end I change just to use a basic shape, half circle, flat circle. But anyway, I'm creating the tops of 4 seats, since this particular basket shape that I've used is not hollow. but I think it's okay because this will be up high enough where guests will never be able to see into it. And here we always have to add a propeller. Again, this wouldn't make much sense to have a propeller here if you think about it, because a propeller on the basket would potentially make the basket swing a lot, but it doesn't matter. It looks interesting, and I also have this interesting kind of fin at the bottom, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but it looks cool. And then of course ropes, because they'd have to throw ropes to attach it. And now we can start second airship, which I kind of think of as a personal airship and is the one that you saw in the introduction to this video. And it's kind of a more advanced model, and it couldn't work in real life. And I don't even really know how it might work, but this is a fantasy steampunk park. So part of the fantasy part is that there are magics associated with this particular fantasy world that could presumably allow airships to work better. So for this one, the top and the bottom will be half domes, and then in the center will be a glass cabin that the operator can stand in. So here I'm creating the ribs that go down the side using these aquatic metal pieces which line up with the ribs I've already put in for the dome. And then they're going to be surrounded with glass. So here I'm creating the cabin with the glass. Eventually 2 of the glass pieces I replace with some solid basic shapes so that we can add some interior detail. This particular airship that I'm creating will actually sit or be docked in the air at the brick building directly behind this build. And so it won't actually be moving, as you saw in the introduction to the video. I may use it in the dark ride portion for the coaster that is the elevated railway, which is the track directly behind this. We'll see, but I just thought it was really interesting. And as you can see, well, you'll see later, there is a platform ramp that is sticking out from the apartment where the 2 gentlemen are sitting having a discussion, which is where this will be parked, and you'll see that in a minute when we get finished. Here I'm adding some more rib detail and just some interesting dome shapes at the top. And then of course I'm going to add some more gadgets. We will add a mast and some ropes holding that mast. Even though there won't be sails on this, I'm just imagining that the designers of these airships would have graduated from having sails on their airships, and so they would have always kept some kind of mast to add sails as needed. Also just because it adds some detail and looks interesting. So here I'm adding some cleats to hold these ropes, and probably not necessary since this particular prop is going to be 2 stories up in the air and not well seen, but I like the detail and I like to think you might be able to see it. So I went ahead and added it. So now I am adding the propellers that will give this airship some lift, and there'll be propellers on either side. First I'm going to add a rod that sticks out a good distance. I think it's really interesting that we have scaling now in Planet Coaster 2. It just makes things so much nicer and allows so many different opportunities. I'm using the same piece here, but I'm scaling it down. The first two pieces are supports, and this is basically a gear, a shaft and a gear. And you can see I added a cone, which kind of represents a beveled gear, which would connect to this piece that would rotate and have the propeller attached to it. There's our completed propeller on one side, and now I'm just copying it to the other side. And then I'm copying it and modifying it for the back of the airship, and will allow it to move forward. And I added these ropes because I figured, well, first of all, I think it looks interesting, but also if this is at rest, maybe those propeller arms are kind of heavy, and so I added those. And here's where I am removing the glass in the back and adding some solid panels so that the inside I can add a little more detail. All you're going to really see is this and a steering wheel that I add later, which is just one of the wheels. But I'm just adding a few decals. No one's ever probably going to see, but I thought it would be interesting, so. And we also want to make this look like it's not brand new, so I was adding some decals to indicate dirt and grime and maybe some corrosion on the sides of this since it's supposed to be metal. And finally, we need a way for the pilot to get into this so they can actually use it. So I'm adding some detail to indicate a door. Pretty simple, just some more support pieces made to look like there's a frame for a door. So this part is supposed to indicate that it actually opens. And I will be adding a handle here in a second. So this is pretty much complete. I'm going to show you here in a second where it will be parked. There will be other airships that will be created in the future. In fact, I'm thinking about one that would be as a restaurant. So that ought to be kind of interesting. Obviously much larger than either of the two I did today. And here's the airship parked against this platform that protrudes from the building and is accessed from the balcony where the two gentlemen are sitting. Now we'll work on the interior of Majorian's Mechanical Marvels. This is the store that will be the exit path for the trolley coaster. The first thing that we need to make is tables that will follow the perimeter of this particular store so that all the mechanical models can sit on it. So I'm using these curved beams from the sorcery pack, getting them the right color, and using them as the tops for these cabinets that Inventions will sit on. And here I'm only showing 2 layers of these, but there's actually 4 that I used to get it wide enough. And again, I'm using one of these quarter circle curved support beams as the front of it. And here I'm coloring it black, and the reason is because oftentimes if they're the same color you won't notice the detail, which makes it kind of pointless to have these separate pieces to indicate some kind of paneling when you can't notice it. And I'm adding some baseboard with some detail where it sticks out. And now I'm showing the first mechanical inventions that are part of this store, and they are mechanical birds. So we have bird cages that are being built here. I'm also creating a larger mechanical bird, which in this case is a peacock. And here I'm showing the build of how I did it just simply out of basic shapes. At the beginning here it doesn't look that great, but eventually I think it looks pretty good. I am using some coral in the back of it as its feathers, and it will also be animated. Feathers in the back of it will actually open up and close. So here's the first bird that I have created out of basic shapes, and I am going to make this one's wasted legs move. I'm going to attach it to these 2 movers that are quarter medium oscillate and quarter medium oscillate reverse. And unfortunately there was no place to hide this except in the building across the street, so that's why I'm moving it all the way out there. And then I'm going to add 2 more of those movers on top of the first set, which will be for moving the head up and down. So there'll be just 2 movements for this particular bird. And here I am taking that second set of movers, getting it correctly positioned to move the neck. Similar to how I showed you that I do this with the horse 2 episodes ago. And then I'm going to move it all the way back. And after that, we can take the body of the bird, attach it to the waist movers, and then the head, and attach it to the head movers. So to do this, I first copy the body. Attach it to the waist movers. And then place that on top of the original body and delete the original body. And then I do the same for the head. And one thing to note, Frontier in the latest update changed the shape of the movers. They seem to be the same overall envelope size, but the top square is smaller, as is the cylinder. I'm not quite sure why they decided to do it, but that's what we have. Okay, so I have erased all the duplicate heads, and now I'm creating the sequence with the 2 waist movers and the 2 head movers. And here's an example of how it moves. You can see the head move up and down slightly and the waist move. And so then what I will do is just copy these in various places, just kind of randomly. Again, it's a quarter oscillate medium and a quarter oscillate medium reverse. And if you put them close to each other, then it allows your movers to move only slightly. And then here I'm showing the peacock moving as well as the bird moving together. And now I'm showing the build of a motorized bike that I imagine the Victorian steampunkers would have created. And it's a 3-wheeler. As you can see, we got a box with the steam mechanism, and we have a nice exhaust pipe. And now I am creating a 2-wheeled mechanized bike. Again, I'm using the parentheses approach to make a circle, because we can make it much smaller. And then for the larger wheel, I'm just using the standard wagon wheel, and I'm going to duplicate it so I can have more spokes. And I also thought it might be nice to have some phonographs, since those were invented in the Victorian era. So I have a small one and a larger, more fancy one, as well as a stereophone, which I'm imagining they might have created using 2 styluses with 2 cones for the sound. And of course the cones here I'm creating using the light flowers, which I think turn out pretty good. One of the reasons that I've included these phonographs here is because they will show up in the trolley ride. And here I have what I'm calling some personal air cars. They are completely impractical, of course, they wouldn't work, but I think they're kind of funny. They're kind of based off of some ideas that I saw, in old drawings of what flying machines might look like. And the smaller one will actually be moving when I get done with this store. So these wooden pieces here, as you recall, are outlining the footprint of the movers that control the horse in the trolley ride. So we have to cover them up, which is why I'm creating a platform here. That's where Madame Majorian will be standing as she works on some of her inventions. So here I'm just showing the paneling that's going up around it. Eventually there will be doors and drawers. And here is Madame Majorian. I created her out of basic shapes and some drapes. She is animated to look over her work, and she is working on a steam mechanism that turns on in a loop as she looks over her materials and then stands back up to watch it operate. And now I'm adding in several different clocks. This is a simple clock that just sits on the wall. There'll be 2 of them, one on each side, but they add a lot of movement, so I kind of liked that. And then I decided that it might be interesting to create some ventilation fans, and in this case some flap fans, which they did actually create these types of things. So in this case I have created them to operate from the ceiling, and they're obviously connected to movers. And here I am adding another small airship. This is again just a basic kind of hot air balloon style with a bucket made out of the motorcycle wheel well, which I thought was kind of interesting. And here is the final clock in the front when you enter the store. And here are 2 air car seats just to fill up the counter. And the path goes back through here, so there will actually be a store. Here you can see I've added the basic store pieces, and then I cover them with some wood. And I don't really have much on them, and what I do have I'm probably going to change. But this is the checkout that will be here. And this is Majorian's Mechanical Marvels. So the final thing we will do in this episode is complete the interior for this bar, but I decided to make it into a restaurant. So here is the backside of that we created in episode 4. So we're going to remove all the columns. They will be added back later, but first I'm just kind of creating with clean slate. And I decided that the interior walls, at least in this older section, will be plaster with kind of paneling below them, but the back of this restaurant will be steampunk style. One of the things is I went to add 2 tables to these windows and discovered that the windows were too small because you can only get these seats a certain distance apart. The game won't allow you to put them closer. So I had to change the facade to match the seats. So as you can see, we've lost a door. The restaurant facade had to be widened. And here I'm adding the counter for the restaurant and the booths that will be at the back. There will just be 3 of them, and this part of the restaurant will have metal walls and be more steampunk. And I wanted to have a curved ceiling over these back booths because I thought it would look interesting, so that's what I'm doing here. And now I am going to decorate the counter. And one thing is, I don't like to have anything I use sticking over the counter because then the guests will always clip into it. So I try to keep the exact shape of it, but I'm going to cover this whole thing up. And I'm going to cover it using the aquatic metal pieces because I want it to look like a Victorian or older wood panel, but instead be done with metal. So here I am adding some pipes just to give some more detail. And then I've created a stool off camera. It uses some of the aquatic metal pieces, the curved pieces, and simply a letter O for the foot rung. Here I'm showing the walls going in with some pipes and gears that will be behind the counter. And this is what it looks like so far with those gear pieces moving. And now adding some detail to the back of the restaurant where the other booths are. And finally some more pipes and other details. And now I am finishing off the front of the restaurant, which of course is the Victorian style where it meets this kind of metal steampunk style. And now I'm creating some lights for the front of the restaurant, go with that theme. And then finally a menu. And I've added a hallway that creates another exit, and I'm adding some molding around the doors that are out of metal. And here's the finished restaurant. You can see I've added a few more things like a coat rack and some hooks. And here is the exterior of this building, which I have updated to include some columns on the corner, more detailing on the railing and some plants, and some more detail for the windows and around the windows upstairs, as well as interiors for the upstairs windows and lighting. Thanks for watching, and stay tuned for the next episode when we will finally start the trolley coaster.